What's going on? Boys, today we are talking FE and discourse. Discourse is a number of things, but there are a few key points. Firstly, discourse is a group's normalized social form. So if you're in a group, in a country, in a forum, any sort of social structure, there will be vernacular, there will be keywords, there will be expectations everybody uses, is expected to follow, and uses to separate and identify each other and others outside the group. For instance, have you ever met someone new and just from the words they choose or the ways they speak, you think, oh, this is one of these fuckers. Or, oh, this is one of my people. They talk like me or they don't talk like me. They know what to say or they don't know what to say. They get it or they don't get it. That's discourse. But it goes further than that and is more specific than that. Discourse involves interpellation, which is not just identifying someone, but you're choosing to let yourself be identified. It's a casting thing. It's an imposition and an acceptance. As in, you're walking down the sidewalk and someone says, "Hey, stupid." And you look, and now you have agreed to be stupid. Interpellation is how hierarchies within discourse are created. People of different castes within a normalized social system or form act and speak different ways. I think it's called in America the Atlantic accent, which was a fake accent, which was supposed to sound hoitier and toitier to separate yourself from the common masses while still being identifiably your culture. It's that. Now, this is important for FE on one level because I think FE types naturally pick up on this. They might not consciously realize this is what's happening, but unconsciously or subconsciously, they do it, they know how to game it, and they are conscious of their place within it, without, again, maybe without ever realizing this is what's happening. And I think that's one of the reasons FE types clash with TE types or FI types, same thing, different order, but because if you are into typology, do field research and shit, you'll notice the way discourse controls TE and FI types, and they don't notice, they don't really pay attention at all to what's going on, even on the subconscious level, and they just follow and follow and follow the discourse, not necessarily other people. But it is other people, but it's a social layering system that FE types seem way more aware of, even if that awareness isn't conscious. Now, I'm bringing this up because with that awareness comes pressure and potential gratification, and with that potential gratification, potential danger. Now, even in new situations, FE types will pick up on the ways people are expected to act pretty quickly. And with that pressure comes the pressure either to conform or to confront, neither of which are great options. SFJs and INFJs will go along to get along even if they dislike it. ENFJs will try to find some way to take it over, or they'll lose themselves in it and become these grand martyrs for some shit they don't even believe in. And TPs will typically feel driven to give the system the finger somehow, even if it never amounts to anything. That pressure to conform or to confront is there. FE types are aware of it, which is why they feel driven or feel it necessary to act on it, either to follow it or to confront it somehow. Now, eventually, once you get beaten down good and hard enough, you might feel the urge to read the discourse and play the role. Not just to get by, not to confront, but just because doing this will further you somehow, or really just because it's fun. I don't know why, but playing a role and being socially rewarded for it can feel gratifying. Now, with that comes problems which you need to pay attention to. First and foremost, people from other discourses might not like the role you're playing, and they won't care that to you it's just playing a role. Because if you're doing it and nobody can see what you're really thinking, that might as well be reality. Or, even worse, you try to explain what you're doing to someone of another discourse, and they turn out to be an FI type, and now they hate you on every level in concept for existing and thinking that way. This whole thing is another problem FE types already seem to be aware of. The merging your friend groups thing, or being around two people you've crafted two separate personalities for, and you feel like you're going to light on fire. Even if you don't know consciously that this is discourse, unconsciously you know you are clashing two separate and incompatible discourses in a way that will lead to disaster. You've ended up in a situation with two contrary subject positions you are expected to hold at once, and if there were two separate people holding those two separate subject positions, they would probably try to hurt each other, or there would be a lot of yelling. You're expected to be both at once. You can't do that. But you, dear anxious wreck, already know that. Two things to pay attention to regarding this you can work on consciously to better your situation and better your FE. Firstly, the nuance and the specificity of subject positions, your roles in discourse, the roles you have been interpolated or cast into. Remember the earlier example. Just based off a few words or the way someone constructs or organizes their words from a new person, just the way they look, you already know in the first 15 seconds whether or not you like this person. It's animal, it's instinctual, and it's unfair, but people will do it to you, and unless you are careful, and even when you're careful, you will do it to people. This is a reason a formal baseline is important. You need to cut down on your discursive, that's the word, discursive identifiers. The littlest things people can use to pin you to a group they probably don't like. Be careful with your vocabulary, be careful with the way you dress, be careful with your tone, be careful of everything. And the more you can standardize and stick with this baseline, the better off you'll be, because people won't be able to pin you and hate you as easily. You have fewer identifiers for people to use to pin you, to interpolate you into a discourse they don't like, because once they dislike you and feel justified in disliking you, they will try to hurt you somehow. Now, the second one is be careful about the roles you play in discourse, the subject positions you occupy. I don't know how other FE types feel about this, but personally, when I've played a role long enough, especially if I've had fun with it, even if that role is nothing like who I am really, if I had fun playing the role and was socially rewarded for playing that role, I start to resemble that role outside that role in my personal life. That ends up being whom I actually look like, which is dangerous for a few reasons. Firstly, you lose your sense of self. Secondly, you develop stinkier identifiers for others to interpolate you using. And what's worse is, if you've lost your sense of self, fuck them. They can interpolate you that way because that's the way you are. It stops being a role you play for whatever reason. It becomes your identity, an identity which will have consequences. Consequences which you can't do anything about because that's who you are. Example, I have one close friend. He is part of a discourse. I am not part of that discourse. To be friends with him, I need to play a role in that discourse. It starts bugging me worse than it already did, because other people I am trying to remain neutral or even politely friendly with, start associating me with things I'm not because they think that's what I am, and my racket, my personal identity, things I believe, my standard of living starts to go down the drain. I had to think a while for the right word there, but I think racket is the right word for personal identity. And a well-crafted racket, a polite racket, a friendly racket, a harder to pin to something negative racket is good for your happiness, for your wallet, for your prospects, for everything. If you're an FE type, unconscious, subconscious awareness of discourse isn't enough if you want to get anywhere. You need to pay attention to discourse. You need to pay attention to the way people interpolate or cast you into roles. You need to pay attention to which roles you play and when, which traits those roles demand, and which traits you are accidentally bringing into other discourses, which will allow people to point the finger at you and say, burn the witch. To fix this, or to take precautions against it, I think a formal baseline is a good idea. But if not that, then an external version of yourself you can focus on and recenter on. Maybe that external identity isn't nice or positive or any necessarily positive adjective, but it is something outside you, but not part of anything or anyone else, you can focus on. I don't know why that works, but before I had a formal baseline, I had Skimmerlit, a character in my head, an idealized version of myself I wanted to become, and I worked hard to become that person. And it was harder for people to shake me off it or to put me anywhere I didn't want to be, because even if everything discursive fucked up, I was still either Skimmerlit or working toward becoming Skimmerlit. Maybe that won't work for other people. It worked for me. I don't know why it worked. Maybe it is FEing yourself into your own private discourse until you can bring it into reality. I don't know. That's what I found success doing, which I've since replaced, at least publicly, with a formal baseline, which I've found more success doing. In summary, if you are an FE type, you probably already have a sense of what discourse is and how it works, but it's something you should pay attention to because people can and will force you into roles you don't want to be in, or you will play a role you don't want to play, or maybe even do want to play, which will have negative consequences if you lose yourself or carry those traits, not thinking, into other discourses, which will allow people to harm you. I finished recording, but I want to say one more thing real quick for the TE types watching. How do you know when an FE type is not faking, is not playing a role, and probably, as a result, likes you? You'll know that's the case when they are still trying to take care of your needs on some level, or on most levels, depending on how developed or intense their FE is, but they are willing to fight you on things. They are willing to make you uncomfortable, which you will probably hate, but for FE types, I've found that is a sign of affection and trust. Second thing, if you are around people of a discourse, or you are in a discourse that is pretty intense in terms of social form and the way everyone kind of acts, and the FE type ignores all of it and acts the way they act, maybe not necessarily the way they, quotes, act, but ignoring the surrounding discourse acts and addresses you separate from it, in a way in the face of it, that is probably a sign they like you or respect you, esteem you. I've found that means an FE type is invested in you enough, respects you enough to address you the way they will continue to address you once the surrounding discourse goes away, because they don't want surrounding social bullshit to affect the way they interact with you. They have enough respect or affection for you to want to avoid that. And now back to the proper original outro. But that about rippity wraps this one up. I hope you enjoyed watching, because I certainly enjoyed making it. I hope I got discourse and interpellation close to right. I pick the things that make sense out of things and then turn them into things I can use. Like if you enjoyed, because it helps me out a lot. Subscribe if you haven't, because we do this shit sometimes. And comment your thoughts, because I love hearing from you. What do you think about discourse? What do you think about FE? What do you think about TE types dealing with FE? Maybe that should be a video. Have you noticed the way TE types live like they're in movies and don't seem to realize it? They are these people who talk about being hyper-autonomous and hyper-independent at all times, yet they are utterly controlled by discourse, by culture, and don't even realize it. But thanks again for watching, everybody. Really, we have a lot of fun on this channel. So much fun. In fact, you can plug your speakers in to the fun and crank it up loud so you can listen to the fun really loud. Like you're having a cool party with cool soda and fun snacks. And that's so much fun we can have on this channel. And I look forward to doing this with you guys again in the future.